Welcome to Faith 7 Business, where stories ignite faith and strategy. Every word here is crafted to inspire, transform minds, and drive action. You don't need more money, you need a spiritual mindset about money. Deuteronomy is not an economics textbook. It's a financial declaration for a people once enslaved, now called to live free, through generosity, forgiveness, and remembrance of redemption. As a Christian leader, you're not merely managing resources. You're telling the kingdom story with every dollar you steward. The real question is, what story are you telling? And today, I invite you to journey with me into the method God uses to teach financial principles in Deuteronomy. Finances don't begin in your wallet, they begin in your memory. In the book of Deuteronomy, nestled between clear commands about tithing, debt forgiveness, and care for the poor, God employs a powerful narrative strategy that modern entrepreneurs often overlook. He teaches financial stewardship by leading his people back into the memory of deliverance. 1. Finances begin with identity, not numbers. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt and that the Lord your God redeemed you from there. Deuteronomy chapter 15 verse 15. Moses didn't start with financial rules. He started with a story, the story of being delivered from bondage. He underscored this: what you possess isn't earned by your merit, but granted by miraculous grace. This isn't just nostalgia, it's a template of redemptive storytelling. Past, slavery. Right-pointing arrow. Present, freedom. Right-pointing arrow. Responsibility, righteous stewardship. God weaves past pain into present blessing to awaken gratitude, which then fuels obedience. 2. Memory is the longest-lasting investment. Every time Scripture says, remember, it isn't aiming at fleeting emotion, but calling us into covenantal living, a transformational commitment. This is similar to how a business is built not just on market trends, but on its founding mission. In every financial command, from tithing to the 7th-year release, God repeats, because you were once slaves, not to shame you, but to anchor your heart in humility and generosity. God isn't merely interested in wealth creation. He wants your wealth to serve a purpose, to reflect the kindness of the Redeemer. 3. The Christian business, where memory becomes mission. Today's Christian entrepreneur can easily be consumed by metrics, KPIs, and growth strategies. But if you forget the memory of redemption, even a successful business becomes just a new Egypt, where money enslaves again. When a leader recalls how God made a way when every door shut, provided when the bank account was empty, taught giving when it hurt the most, they're no longer just selling, they're testifying. Imagery and rhythm, the financial cycle of the kingdom. While the first part of Deuteronomy calls us to memory and identity, the second part reveals another treasure: symbolic language and sacred rhythm. God doesn't just instruct with rules. He paints a financial ecosystem through imagery, cycles, and spiritual cadence. 1. Scripture teaches finance like it teaches music. You shall tithe all the yield. Every 7 years. Cancel debts. Deuteronomy chapters 14 to 15. Rather than dry management systems, God uses imagery and rhythm. Tithe 10% to declare his lordship. 7 years. Cancel debts. Free slaves. 3 years. Care for Levites and the vulnerable. Annually. Celebrate feasts to remember. This isn't just math, it's melody. It's a sacred rhythm of obedience, repeated, remembered, and relived. 2. The 7-year cycle. God's blueprint for renewal. God didn't design financial life as a linear climb. He designed it as a cycle. Stage spiritual meaning business application. Work sowing, creating growth, expansion. Rest pause to acknowledge the giver strategic retreat. Reflection, forgive let go of debts. Lift burdens renegotiate, rebuild relationships. Rebuild start anew with mercy at the center realign vision. Restructure operations. This is not just financial strategy, it's intentional living. Just as John Maxwell teaches, lead with eternal rhythm, not temporary pressure. Let me leave you with this. God's way isn't just about profit, it's about purpose. And when your purpose is rooted in redemption, even your budget becomes a testimony of grace. Let us not build businesses that forget. Let us build kingdom enterprises that remember, and therefore, transform. 3. Sacred language that touches the soul. Worldly entrepreneurs speak in KPIs, ROI, and P/E ratios. But kingdom-minded entrepreneurs must learn the language of heaven. Tithe, right-pointing arrow I don't own, I steward. Debt forgiveness, right-pointing arrow I invest not just in capital, but in compassion, festival, right-pointing arrow. I celebrate not profit margins, but the faithfulness of God. When you infuse these images into your brand story, team culture, and sales training, you're not just running a business, you're reteaching a language of grace. 3. The first then principle and the principle of community. What you give first will determine what you reap later. Deuteronomy isn't just a law code, it's a sacred ecosystem. Its principles aren't isolated, they're woven like a divine tapestry. Giving, loving, serving, worshiping, and sharing all operate in rhythm together. 1. Give first. Aligning with the flow of blessing. Be sure to set aside 1/10 of all that your fields produce, so that you may learn to revere the Lord your God always. Deuteronomy chapter 14 verse 22 to 23. The give first principle, tithing, isn't a transaction. It's a value statement of priority. By laying the tithe on the altar before spending anything else, God's people declared, I live by grace, not by expenses. I am a steward, not an owner. I invest in the kingdom before I invest in myself. This resonates deeply with Jim Rohn's wisdom. Don't spend what's left after giving and saving. Give and save first, then spend what's left. 2. The community thread, from altar to table. In Deuteronomy, the tithe wasn't just a temple tax. It was a vehicle of blessing distribution. Levites were sustained because they had no land inheritance. Orphans and widows were cared for with dignity. Families celebrated together in the presence of the Lord. Each tithe acted as a bridge, breaking financial isolation and forming sacred connections between worshipers, servants, and the needy. Blessing was never meant to stagnate, it was designed to flow. 3. Blessing never runs dry when given to the right place. Give generously, because the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in everything you put your hand to. Deuteronomy chapter 15 verse 10 to 11. The world's mindset says, to give is to lose. But the kingdom mindset says, to give is to open the valve of continuous blessing. Think of the widow in Zarephath during Elijah's time, when she gave her last bit of flour to the prophet first. Her jar never ran dry. That's the divine equation. First then, combined with community. Give first, right-pointing arrow, receive later. Care for others, right-pointing arrow, God cares for you. Bless the community, right-pointing arrow, you're sustained during famine. Kingdom finance. 3 principles that break the chains of financial slavery. You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. Deuteronomy chapter 8 verse 17. With this single caution, God, through Moses, flips the entire secular economic paradigm on its head. While the world teaches you to own, Scripture invites you to remember. While others hoard to avoid lack, God teaches you to give so you'll never run dry. Welcome to the book of Deuteronomy, where financial principles aren't taught through spreadsheets, but through memory, festival, and the rhythms of release. Here are the 3 liberating truths that tear off the shackles of financial bondage. Not to make you rich, but to make you free. 1. All wealth comes from the Lord, the one who gives power to produce it. Deuteronomy chapter 8 verse 17 to 18. Do not say, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth. This is more than a rebuke to pride. It's a call to deep gratitude. True leadership doesn't begin with ability. It begins with remembrance. Every sale, every signed contract, every breakthrough idea, is living proof of one reality. God is still working through you. Brain, forget this truth, and success becomes an altar to your ego. Light bulb, but remember it, and every step becomes an act of worship. As Jim Rohn once said, success is not to be pursued, it is to be attracted by the person you become. And that person is someone who lives by grace, not just by KPI. 2. Give first, to learn the fear of the Lord. Deuteronomy chapter 14 verse 22 to 29. God doesn't need your money. He wants your heart, first. In each harvest season, He didn't demand taxes. He invited His people to a celebration. They brought their tithe, and then ate, rejoiced, and shared with the Levite, the orphan, and the widow. This was more than tithing. It was rewriting the community narrative through the first portion. Donald Miller said, the brand is not the hero. The customer is. The brand is the guide. In kingdom finance, God is the guide. You are not the main character. You are called to offer your best to tell His story of grace. Light bulb, every time you give, you're training your faith and declaring, I believe, not because I have enough, but because I believe He will never let me lack. 3. The cycle of release. Forgive debts every 7 years. Deuteronomy chapter 15 verse 1 to 11. The world teaches, who holds the debt, holds the power. But the Bible teaches, who releases the debt, sows freedom. Every 7 years, God commanded debt cancellation, not for bookkeeping reasons, but for heart transformation. Not just for fairness, but for grace. In Christian business, this principle challenges every leader. Are you willing to release a customer in crisis? Are you willing to place dignity above performance? Are you courageous enough to let grace outweigh strategy? John Maxwell says, you can't give what you don't have. The one who forgives is someone who remembers they were once forgiven. Bell, what financial story are you telling? Pause, not to calculate, but to remember. Look at your bank statement, as if it were a spiritual testimony. And ask yourself, am I using money to build walls, or to open doors? Am I stockpiling for safety, or sowing into freedom for others? You were blessed not to live rich, but to live large. Not to become important, but to become influential. Not to keep, but to give. Railway track, the kingdom financial journey, from memory to movement. These 3 sections are not just Old Testament economics. They are theological, spiritual, and leadership pillars, woven by God into a sacred symphony for kingdom entrepreneurs living with purpose. God's method. He teaches through memory, not might. God doesn't establish financial laws with threats, but with a story, the story of deliverance from Egypt. So you never forget. Financial wisdom begins with humility, not ability. Application keywords: remembrance, grace, memory, identity, counterculture. The rhythm of the kingdom, a sacred cycle, not a growth curve. God paints financial rhythms like tithing, sabbatical, debt release, festivals, and atonement years, to place his people in a financial universe of grace. No one is left behind because of debt. No one is forgotten because of poverty. No one is idolized because of wealth. Application keywords: cycle, first fruits, debt release, rest, corporate grace. 3. Priority and community. The overflowing blessing never runs dry. God doesn't just teach giving to him. He teaches sharing with the Levite, widow, and orphan. Kingdom finance is about connecting the strong to the weak, the surplus to the shortage. The more accurately you give, the more channels you open for blessing. Application keywords: priority, overflow, community bond, sowing first, spiritual festivals. Questions for reflection. What financial story is my business telling, memory or control? Is my company operating in a cycle of grace, or in a spiral of pressure? Am I giving leftovers, or am I giving first? Do I have a forgiveness fund, or do I use debt to dominate? Is the blessing I receive flowing out, or is it being hoarded? Rocket Kingdom Business Strategy Framework. Strategy, practical implementation. Biblical financial map. Reevaluate all cash flow based on give, forgive, rebuild. Financial Festival Days. Host annual Gratitude and Grace Day with testimonies and charitable outreach. Community Tithe Fund. Set aside a fixed percentage of profits to bless employees, partners, or the poor. 7-year grace cycle. Every 7 years, review financial commitments to forgive, restructure, and restore. Financial story selling training. Equip your team to tell your company's financial journey as a redemptive, faith-filled story. Folded hands. A final invitation. Will you be an owner of assets, or a steward of grace? Do you want your money to speak about you, or about God? If you're ready to redesign your business on kingdom financial principles, let me walk with you, from strategy to story, from cash flow to testimony. Because your business isn't just called to succeed, it's called to tell a never-ending story of grace. Thank you for following Faith 7 Business. Every follow is more than a number, it's a mark of faith, a spark of transformation, and a shared journey toward lasting value. Stay with us, where stories, faith, and strategy unite to ignite inspiration and action. Faith 7 Business, writing to lead, living to make an impact.